Welcome to Microcap Moments, a podcast from Shore Capital Partners that highlights the stories of founders, investors, and leaders who have taken on the challenge of transforming ideas and small companies into high-growth organizations. The journey of building and scaling a business takes one down many unexpected paths. It's a journey where we learn from our mistakes, fall down often, but have the entrepreneurial grit to pick ourselves up and persevere. Within this series, we will share these stories of success and failure, of the challenges and the rewards faced by those who dare to dream big. And through their lessons learned, we hope to inspire others who are on a similar journey of becoming, growing, and leading.
In this episode, I talk with Ken Meyer, executive partner with Shore Capital Partners. Ken shares how his career in the food business, including 24 years with Whole Foods, all started on his family farm, which itself was deeply rooted in his family's work ethic. He talks about his realization through early internships that food is really about people, and how that recognition ignited his interest in the business of food and the people who make it happen. In fact, Ken's first break in the food business wasn't so obviously about food at all, but it was definitely about people. Ken was managing and scheduling labor for a retailer who, unbeknownst to him at the time, was preparing themselves to sell to Whole Foods. Fast forward a couple of decades, and it was Ken who, after helping Whole Foods scale, initiated and led their sell to Amazon. He describes his career success as being deeply connected to the culture they were building at Whole Foods and the people he was able to impact with that culture, from customers to communities to the team around him. He talks about the importance of deduction when you lead and grow a business, and understanding which opportunities are really distractions and which ones may be showing you the path ahead. And finally, Ken shares that the accomplishment he's most proud of is that his kids are proud of him, that they've come to understand the real meaning behind bagging groceries, and with that, the meaning behind Ken's entire career. Welcome, Ken, and to get us started, will you just introduce yourself and give us your name and what you do with Shore Capital?
I'm Ken Meyer. I'm an executive partner at Shore Capital and joined Shore about a year and a few months ago.
So you spent about 24 years at Whole Foods and now support the Shore Food and Beverage investments. How did you get into food and beverage in the first place? What drew you to that from a career standpoint or a personal interest standpoint? What was compelling about that to you?
Well, it goes back to how I was brought up, and I grew up on a family farm, so I had this understanding and the benefit of really connecting closely to how food was growing and created and power of that. And as I went through that as a young teenager, I started really appreciating that and found an opportunity to then go to school to study that. So I studied food retailing, food systems, and did some internships, one in Seattle, one in New York City. And I realized growing up on a farm, you work really hard. Working in retail, if you work really hard, you create opportunities. And I knew I could translate that over. And I loved the connection to the food and the relationship to where it came from and what it does for people. And then I also loved the connection of working with people and realizing the power of what that means to be on a team, work with people. And that's really what drew me into the food business.
Yeah. And how did you find that transition from the family farm to the business side of food or agriculture or otherwise? How did you make that transition, and what maybe surprised you as you moved from the heart of being on a farm and being a producer to the business side of food?
I think the benefit of growing up on a farm, you understand at the beginning point of the food system. You understand it in a very deep and meaningful way. So having that perspective and then going into the retail side of it where you're transacting, building a business, selling product, building a relationship with the customer, you have that beginning point, which is really powerful and understanding. And then as I sort of realized, wow, this is about people. It's about the people that you work with, the people that are producing product for you, the communities that you're in. It's about the customers that you have. When I realized that sort of stakeholder understanding, like it really gave me this connection deeply to wanting to pursue that even further.
Was that through your studies that you kind of got that awareness, or how did you get to that point?
Look, I'll be honest, whether we edit this or not, like I think this is worth knowing. Like I barely graduated from college. But I got out, and I will say I learned a ton while I was in college, but I also really realized that by the internships that I did. by actually going out and working in Seattle, Washington for a small retailer, going to New York City, working for a really well-known family retailer. And I realized, I said, oh, this is good. If I work really hard, I can build relationships with people. I can find my pathway here. I never knew like where I was going. I only knew that I loved what I was doing. And I think that's what kept me focused on being in the realm of what meant a lot to me. And that's how I sort of pursued my career.
Yeah. And how did you get to Whole Foods? And you were there, as I mentioned, for 24 years. What was Whole Foods like when you first got there?
I mean, I worked for a retailer in New York City called D'Agostino's, and we had hired someone to do labor and logistical planning for us. And they trained me on that. And so I learned this really interesting skill for the business. And the consultant that worked with us called me up one day and said, hey, these guys in Washington, D.C. are looking to hire somebody to do this work. I don't want to do it. Would you want to do it? And so what it was Fresh Fields, which was a company that was bought by Whole Foods. What I didn't realize at the time is they hired me to help prepare to sell to Whole Foods. And so I went down, and I actually was in a relationship with my ex-wife at the time. And her and I always joke because she worked for the CIA, wrote the President's Daily Briefing. And I used to tell her I would never live in Washington, D.C. because I live in New York City. Next thing you know, I'm moving to Washington, D.C. and starting my career.
Never say never.
Exactly. That's the one lesson I can tell everyone. Never say never, because it's always the things you don't expect happen. And I ended up going down there and doing that work. And that's how I sort of began my career with Whole Foods. And I thought when the merger happened between Whole Foods and Fresh Fields, I thought I was going to be one of the first people that they were going to fire, because why would they need a guy doing labor scheduling? But what I didn't realize is they had sort of an idea of how I can help them in their business. And so I was able to stick around through the merger and start a career with them.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm going to jump forward and then I'm going to come back to your time, because you also were a part of Whole Foods as Amazon purchased Whole Foods. Talk a little bit about those two bookend kinds of sales and integrations in your career.
I mean, it's interesting because it gave me early days what it means and feels like to be acquired by somebody. But then we went and started acquiring a lot of companies that I was involved with. So we acquired over 24 companies during my time at Whole Foods. So I was able to take that beginning point of being someone who's on the team but not leading, to know that experience. And then on the other side of it is I was the one that really sort of initiated the process with Amazon and led that beginning negotiations and created that opportunity for us to then go to a very large organization and navigate that process. It was like truly like two bookends of an experience and a lot that happened in between. But I learned a lot about how do you create the transparency in a process so that you can build trust. And when the trust is built, you can then find common ground to then negotiate and create a really good combination of an organization.
Well, I would pull on that a little bit more, because I have to believe, I don't know about from the Fresh Fields to the Whole Foods transition, but I imagine that there were a whole lot of questions within Whole Foods with the Amazon transaction. And how do we stay Whole Foods if we're going to be a part of this giant company? And this is a tech company. So talk a little bit about that trust conversation that you all had to have with your people during that transaction.
I think the understanding of what it means to have a big organization like Amazon come in and buy another big organization like Whole Foods, like there's a lot of fear. So fear is always present in that process. And how do you address that? And a lot of it was, we were as an organization very transparent. During the deal process, there were only 6 of us that knew that it was happening in Whole Foods and 6 of people in Amazon that knew it was happening. So no one knew. We had to keep that very quiet during the process of negotiating the deal. And we did a lot of back and forth to negotiate that deal. Once it was announced, our goal was really to create an understanding of how we were going to create a company together. And to the credit of our leadership and Amazon's leadership, we said, how do we do that? So we said, we have values in Amazon, we have values in Whole Foods. Let's create the values of how we want to combine these companies. And we went through a whole process with our stakeholders and team and built an understanding of common values. And that was really like meaningful to everybody, because it wasn't Amazon coming in and saying, this is the way it is, and Whole Foods fighting that the whole time. It was like, okay, how do we mutually come together and create a team and a solution that we can really thrive on? And it was certainly the intention and the way in which we navigated during the time that I was there.
So I want to go back to your time with Whole Foods prior to Amazon. 24 years is a long run with one company. You came in through the initial acquisition with Fresh Fields, and you were doing labor and logistical planning. Talk a little bit about your growth and career evolution within the Whole Foods experience.
Yeah, I always joke with people that I never realized I was there that long until I left.
That's a great sign, by the way.
And
right?
it was always, I was like, holy cow, I was there for a long time and I did a lot of stuff. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I never thought of it that way. And I think what happened for me was the way we were building the company was all through operations. And so I knew, and someone very wisely, one of the leaders of the company said to me, hey, Ken, if you want to have an opportunity and career with Whole Foods, you have to go in and run a store. Our leadership runs stores. And I was like, yes, I want to run a store. So I went in and ran a store in Georgetown in DC. It was a really bad situation. And I went in and just realized this is an incredible opportunity to be able to be empowered to build a business, be empowered to make decisions. And one of the things to understand about Whole Foods culture that I think is really one of the beautiful things, it's a context and an empowerment culture. So we give lots of context. We create lots of transparency and we empower our people to make the best decisions possible. We use failure as a learning mechanism, not as a punishment. And it really allowed us to build teams and build thriving businesses by doing that. And so I discovered that very quickly and then realized at my store that I had 36 countries working in my store representing, because I'm in Georgetown.
Yeah.
World Bank, IMF, all the embassies, all these people were here from all over the world. And I had this beautiful culture of people here. And when I realized that, I said, okay, how do we leverage all this into what we're doing here? And we put up on the entry in the store everybody's language for welcome. And when they left, everyone's language for thank you. It made this immediate connection to the team and to the community. Like the community loved it. And so we really took that to heart and then built an enterprise around that. And then as that progressed and succeeded, I then had opportunities to go in and I went to Austin, Texas to be the vice president of the Southwest region, the oldest region in the country. They wanted to change and they wanted some new perspective. So I was able to go into that. And then we bought a company in Atlanta and I got to go to Atlanta and do that. And I always say this to everyone. People say, well, how did you succeed and grow? And I said, the main thing I did was I focused on doing what I was empowered to do really, really well and build a team around me. And I am only successful by the team that I built. And that's where I think I was able to see people's capabilities and help be a catalyst for them to be more successful in what they wanted to do and achieve what they want to do, which then built the team for me that helped me succeed in what I was doing. So I've had the benefit of working with amazing people.
Yeah. Say more about, maybe it's in the context of building teams, but you said something before about a context culture. I haven't heard context in that sense. Tell me more about what you mean when you say context in regards to culture at Whole Foods.
Well, to give context around that, when we merged, Fresh Fields merged with Whole Foods, this is an interesting thing. All they cared about was making sure everyone had email. And I'm like, email? And we're talking about way long time ago in the early 90s. And what I realized was Whole Foods believed, and we believe, that you have to provide lots of information and understanding to people so that they can build an understanding on their own about what's happening and not be fearful of giving them too much information. So we had open books. So if someone wanted to know how much someone else made in our company, we published a book that someone could look at. If you wanted to read anything that we wrote other than a handful of things, it was always available to people to read. And we just wanted to build that trust. And that's the context. So when someone understands where we're going, what the mission purpose is, and why we made a decision. So we would make a decision 3 ways at Whole Foods. We would do it through consensus, consultative, and command. Very rarely did you make a command decision because that was always for safety and the welfare of people. Consultative were you wanted experts to give you advice, but ultimately you had to make the decision. Most of our decisions were made on consensus. Getting the entire team to buy in and agree to it took time and took context. And then once we did that, we communicated that very clearly out. How did we get to this place? Why did we make the decision? What does this mean for you? How can you make it better? How can you have a part in this in the future? And by doing that, giving that context and empowering people, they then go on their own and make the best decisions for the organization versus saying, do this, you have to be this way, follow this guy. Like obviously those exist to a certain context, but truthfully, the best thing is the more communication you have, the more transparency you have, the more understanding you have. Leaders, team members, they buy into that and they commit to doing what's in the context of that direction.
And at this point, you've worked and seen a lot of companies, a lot of different sizes. Why don't you think more people do that?
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy. And Shore has this incredible process of finding really great founders and great platforms to build to then create these enterprises. A lot of founders are very much wanting to own every component of their business, and they're not comfortable giving that out to anyone. in some ways, it's rightful. They are not wrong. But I think if you're going to scale and build an organization that's spreading out, you can't have everything funnel up to you.
Yeah.
And so I think a little bit I think leadership sometimes has fear. They don't want mistakes to happen versus let them be learning mechanisms. And they want to have the control. So that's a different style of leadership. I think it's hard for organizations to get there. I find more are wanting to be in that place, but find it difficult if it didn't start in the beginning.
How do you think about or talk with other Shore folks about it, CEOs or otherwise, that conversation with a potential partner who is a founder and, to your explanation, rightfully has kind of held things together. They've really muscled this thing. They've built it over years, maybe built their life around this business. How do you help them transition to that platform thinking? And any thoughts on how you would recommend or advise having those conversations with the founder who's considering a private equity backing and considering becoming part of a platform company?
We deal with it all the time. And I think the thing that I move to with these founders is, what are the constraints that have prevented you from going and becoming either bigger or different or evolve? Like, what's stopping you? And when you do that, they have this reflection process. And this is where I think it's an important thing, because how self-reflective a founder is tells you a lot about their ability to transition into a bigger organization. And if they struggle with sort of saying, oh, no, we don't need any of that, I've got this all figured out, then you kind of start having these markers of saying, this might be a difficult transition for this person. But what I find more times than not, founders feel constrained. They don't have the capital, but they don't have the resources. And a lot of it's the resources, is the team, the expertise to level up the business. And I think what we are able to do is really talk about that relationship that we build from the beginning of trust, that ability to help them provide better resource, team, and structure, and then fuel their growth, not just with capital, because capital is everywhere. Like, capital is not a unique substance, but intellectual understanding of a business, capabilities to build team, capabilities to build better ways of working, better mechanisms. Those are the strengths that Shore has that I think make us so successful and so unique. And I think it's also from the top where our culture is. Our culture, I always say to people, how'd you end up at Shore? Justin and I met several times, breakfast, lunch, called me up. And it wasn't until I came in and met the team and said, this is a lot like Whole Foods. The thinking here, the ability to help a small founder be able to grow their business and realize a greater potential. And that's when I really sort of saw how we can do this. And so not every founder works. And some, we realize maybe it's a different lane for them. Yeah. But a lot of them are really, they love the structure that we provide.
Yeah. I think that maybe your experience you mentioned before, that I don't know that everybody would necessarily understand, myself included, but that Whole Foods was acquisitive. And so you were experiencing the acquisition integration process as part of Whole Foods. Most of us just know it as this big brand, but in reality, your process in the years you were there was a lot of this kind of acquisition and integration going on, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was 27 stores when Fresh Fields was bought by Whole Foods, and we doubled 22 out of 22 stores literally overnight. And then from there, for the next several years, we bought geographical positions all over the country, which then became the foundations for our regions. So then we had 12 regions. Once those regions were established, we would buy smaller groups of retailers that we knew. It's also to know, we couldn't just buy any retailer. We had to buy a retailer that had very similar values, quality standards as we did, because otherwise it was such a big transition. And then we built stores, and then we built stores on top of those foundations. So you had to get a founder that was really willing to go and be part of what we were doing. Truthfully, most of the founders chose this as an opportunity to step away. What we found is the second tier of leadership all rose up because they were with a founder that was sort of holding them. Whereas when they saw the Whole Foods culture and empowerment and context, they thrived. And which is what I did. I was sort of under the radar person in leadership. And then I realized this is exactly how I want to be as a leader and be as a team member.
Yeah. What did you learn about finding the right founder or team in the Whole Foods process that informs how you support Shore companies as well? You referenced it, the challenge when you don't find the right founder and the right team, that those struggles last years trying to integrate and align and all of those things. So just any thoughts on what that looked like for you at Whole Foods, but then also maybe how you coach with Shore companies as well?
Yeah, I think, and it's an interesting thing because I focus a lot on what's called EQ. And we all know what that is, emotional intelligence, because that tells me a lot about who that leader is, that founder is. And that's what we would focus on a lot. Obviously, that's, is it a great business? Is it operated well? Does it have the potential to be more? But then if you're talking about founder to joining, whether it was joining Whole Foods or joining Shore, like I really focused on that because it told me so much about how they would be able to succeed in the environment that we were creating and building. And the advantage of Whole Foods is the culture always evolved. It always changed. Every time we made an acquisition, it created another level of uniqueness. In the same way we do at Shore, that is true. Whenever you start with your platform, you add a company, you add more companies, that culture is always evolving. That leadership has to be able to be evolving and adapting and willing to allow the organization to get bigger than them. And I think that's where the EQ comes in, because a lot of times the organization and the person, they're defining of each other. And it's the leaders that are able to step back and say, okay, I want this organization to grow. I'm okay if I'm not totally tied to that anymore, but I know what I did to get it to that point. And that's the thing I look at.
So I want to switch gears a little bit because you've also invested in a couple of other and started some other companies with Midnight Ventures and Primo Fare. Will you talk just a little bit about that and how that extends your work in food and why those are part of your journey at this point?
I look at my body of work in the world today as a function of all my passion. I had the benefit of overseeing and leading our venture group. And so we were funding lots of small companies to help grow them. And when I left, we founded this group, Midnight Ventures, to be able to be in the food space, investing in very young startup organizations. And I have a great team around me that is super smart, young. And we pretty much see every interesting product that's coming into the market now, which is really fun, really fun. And they love to have us consider them. Primo Fare, again, I sort of look at my body of work at Whole Foods. I had the UK group. I used to oversee that group as part of my team. And I used to joke I'd go to the UK for 2 days and then I'd travel for 2 weeks visiting all of our producers in Europe and getting to know them because they were making product for us. When I left Whole Foods, I sort of said to myself, how could I build an enterprise around this that allows me to continue to do that, but in a different sort of space? And Primo Fare was built on the premise that there's a lot of really amazing European food companies that want to have business opportunity in the US, but they don't have the capability to do it. And so what we have done is, whether they're $300-400 million company in Italy or a $5 million company in France or a $100,000 company in Italy, if the product is really interesting, we bring that product into the US, we buy product. We're like a traditional distributor, but we also then work on only marketplaces. And so one of my partners was the founder of iGourmet. He realized that his business was being constrained to grow because of Amazon and Walmart and all these marketplaces, the .coms. And so our business model with Primo Fare is we work with brands only on marketplaces before we go into physical retail. And it creates this whole opening of enterprise for them that they never thought about, even if they're in physical retail in the US right now. So it's a great way for me to stay connected to all my European producers.
When you think about that work from the investor perspective, and you think about what you know and have seen from the executive partner perspective with Shore, as well as your own operating experience, what have you learned about building something that lasts from all of your experience?
Well, I think you can use these words in any way. You have to have grit and you have to be tenacious. And grit meaning you're going to have lots of rejections because, either people don't understand what you're trying to do or they don't believe in what you're trying to do, but you have to have conviction to be able to pursue it. The tenaciousness is you have to open every door and push through every door and not let yourself have a door closed and not go to the next one and open it. And I think that is such an important thing that I've learned in all my business. So whether it's my work with Shore, work with Primo Fare, or my experiences and work with Whole Foods, or my work with Midnight, is that if you really have conviction with what you're doing and you really believe in it, you have to stay in that journey. It's easy to get sidetracked. And I always say success is about deduction, meaning you have to deduct things that you're doing that aren't lining up to how you're going to succeed. Because we have a tendency to get distracted very easily. And so instead of, no road to success is straight, it's always a weave, but it's also to what degree do you weave and let go of something to then continue down the pathway of where you're going. And having that conviction and believing what you're doing is really important.
Well, and I got to believe that when you fail to deduce in those early days is when you grow, and then that system isn't ready to scale because it's noisy and it's got multiple parts and factions and fractures and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I see that all the time with Midnight, where these founders have a great product, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, we've got this one, this one, this one. And we're like, you haven't even gotten down 10 yards on the first one. I always want inch wide, mile deep versus inch deep, mile wide. And that's, again, founder focus, business leader focus is really important.
So when you think about your career, what have you accomplished that you're most proud of?
My most proud is that my kids are proud of me. That's it. To me, it's always funny because people are like, what motivates you? And I said, my children motivate me. They are the center of my world. And for them to now be very interested in what I'm doing and versus, oh, you're just a guy who works at a grocery store, you bag groceries. And like, I would bring them to openings all the time. And all I would do is bag groceries. And they're like, oh, all you do is bag groceries, Dad. I'm like, yeah, but I'm talking to the customer. Like, but you're just bagging groceries. So for me, it's really like, that's my biggest accomplishment is the ability to have them see and connect to what I'm doing and understand that it has this deeper meaning and that I'm doing something meaningful.
That's awesome. Well, just to go further on the family side of things, does your family that was on the farm recognize the connection as to where you...
Yeah, growing up on a farm. I mean, here's the thing. My dad was the only one in his family who left South Dakota to go to college. He went to graduate school and then went in the Peace Corps, was in the first class in the Peace Corps, went to Africa, worked in Africa, and then came and worked for Kodak. So we moved to Rochester, New York, but he said, we're going to have a family farm so you can experience what we did.
Oh, wow.
As a child growing up. And it ended up being a very big farm. And we actually did something very interesting. My dad, early days, he had this very large group that he worked with, and we were raising hogs, and he created the first, in my mind, like one of the early days CSAs, community supported agriculture. He would go in with an order form and people would fill out the order form and we would custom butcher hogs for all the people that worked for him. And they'd come on a Saturday morning, 30 cars lined up picking up their orders. And so we started this whole little enterprise doing that as kids. And so for him to see what I'm doing now and my mom, they totally see the connection. They knew like that there would be something there for me.
Well, and he carried that value from his own background, right? He didn't have to do that. He was working for Kodak and doing these other things.
He knew the value of like what it meant to work really hard. So I got to play sports if I worked milking cows at 3:30 in the morning. So I would get up between 3:30 and 4 in the morning, milk cows, go to school, play sports. That was the way. And I didn't know any better. Like I thought that's what everybody did. And so you learn that discipline of hard work. I think they recognized that was what I carried into my career. And it really wasn't about the titles of what I had over my career. It was really about the opportunity to do interesting things and work with great people.
Yeah. What's the best advice you ever got?
Oh, I remember working in New York and there was a job that came up and the president of the D'Agostino's came in and I said to him, why didn't I get considered for that job? And he said, no one's going to pick you. You got to raise your hand. It was interesting. It was the first time someone said to me, like, no matter how good you are, you've got to show up. And I think one other little nugget that I think was really great advice was, and I give this as much as I had gotten it, carry it forward, is a lot of people always ask me, like, what does it take to get to where you are? And I say, it takes you focusing on what you're doing today, not thinking about what you want to do tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. Be really successful in what you're doing today. That creates the opportunity. And so often it's hard because we're always looking at what's next versus what we are. And then we wonder, why aren't we doing better here? Why can't we get this recognition? It's like, because you're busy not focusing on what you're doing.
I got to believe that ties to working on a farm because you can't be looking ahead and forget to feed the animals or...
You've got to be very present. You've got to take care of the things that matter the most each day and doing them at the highest level, like striving for excellence. That was the other thing that I was taught very young in the retail business was that, someone would say to me, there's a place for everything. Everything has its place. And why did that matter in retail? Because if you didn't execute really succinctly what you were merchandising in that store, the ability to maximize the sales or get the customer experience to where it was, you could never do that. And I love that sort of mindset. And that was a discipline that I think has helped me most of the time.
If you enjoyed this episode, check out our other Microcap Moments episodes at www.shorecp.university/podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. Here you will also find our Bigger, Stronger, Faster, and Everyday Heroes series, each highlighting the people and stories that make investing in the lower middle market unique. This podcast was produced by Shore Capital Partners and recorded in the Andrew Malone Podcast Studio, with story and narration by Anderson Williams, recording by Austin Johnson, editing by Real Audiobooks, sound design, mixing, and mastering by Mark Galloop of Real Audiobooks. Special thanks to Ken Meyer. This podcast is the property of Shore Capital Partners, LLC. None of the content herein is investment advice, an offer of investment advisory services, nor a recommendation or offer relating to any security. See the Terms of Use page on the Shore Capital website for other important information.